So you want to know how to build like this guy, Good Times with Scar, or Scar for short. Well, good for you, because today I'm going to be showing you exactly how to do that. But first, who is Scar? Well, Scar is a very popular Minecraft builder. He's been making videos on YouTube for about 13 years now, and honestly, he's built some really cool stuff over the years. He also plays on the Hermitcraft server, and he's known as one of the best builders on there. But now, how can you build like this guy? Well, it's actually pretty simple. First of all, let's cover the basics, starting with Scar's build style. Scar's build style is honestly pretty complicated. There's no specific style of building that Scar builds in, like medieval or futuristic, for example. But if one thing's for sure, it's that Scar's builds are pretty much always fantastical. There's always no Scar build that doesn't have some fantasy aspect to it, like maybe this giant volcano right next to a castle. If you watch enough of Scar's videos, you'll notice pretty quickly that Scar really likes stuff like Star Wars, Harry Potter, as well as stuff like Disney World. Scar is really a kid at heart, which you can tell by his builds. Another really important part of building like Scar is terraforming. Scar is known as one of the best at terraforming in Minecraft. Now, terraforming is basically building your own terrain, if you didn't know. I also consider building custom trees and stuff like that as terraforming as well. So as you can tell over on the side of Scar's Hermitcraft Season 9 base, for example, this is more or less all custom terrain. The custom terrains that Scar builds are honestly straight up beautiful, and you can tell that he's been building custom terrain for a while. Even the trees on Scar's custom terrain are really unique. Now, this is all to fit the amusement park style of his base, but as you can tell in Hermitcraft Season 8, the entire mountain and most of these trees are all built by Scar. I think it's important to pay a lot of attention to the terrain around Scar's builds, because his builds are almost always built on custom terrain in some way. Another important aspect of Scar's builds is the way Scar tells a story with his builds. A big part of his builds is how they feel. When walking through them or looking at his build, immersion is a big part of what makes Scar's builds so good, which means telling a story with your builds as well as having a theme for them is really important. You can tell a quote-unquote story just by adding a cart traveling from one house to another, or maybe even that cart was delivering firewood. The cart could even have turned the corner too fast and flipped over. Just something as small as a cart can help give your builds life as well as tell a story. Sure, you can go as far as writing full lore for your world, but when it comes to Scar's builds, it's honestly all the small things that come together to give life to his builds. This makes his builds feel more immersive and cohesive. In general, Scar's really good at detailing. He adds a bunch of random things around that help make his builds come together and tell a story. Now, if we take Scar's Hermitcraft Season 9 base, he used a lot of armor stands to add life to his amusement park. Now, not everybody likes to play with mods like this, and I understand that, but if you do, then adding armor stands around your builds is honestly the easiest way to show people existing in the world. For example, you can tell that this kid here is very excited about something he saw, and he just looks like he's having a great time with his parents. I know armor stands and mods isn't for everyone, but I still think it's a cool trick that Scar used in his Season 9 base. Moving on though, a lot of builds that Scar makes are just for fun. For example, in Season 7 of Hermitcraft, when the Nether update was announced, Scar decided to build an entire dig site going down to the Nether, or at least that was the general idea of it. What came out of it is honestly, in my opinion, a really cool build, and all of this was built because Scar wanted to do something fun for the Nether update. Similar to his more recent Death Star shop, Scar just wanted to build a shop, and because he likes Star Wars, he decided to build a Death Star. There's not much more to it. Scar usually just builds stuff for fun. If Scar thinks it'll look cool and it'll be fun, Scar just goes ahead with it and builds the thing for fun. Sometimes that thing doesn't turn out too good, like this giant pile of ores, but that's besides the point. Moving on, let's talk about the blocks Scar uses in his builds. Something I noticed is a lot of the builds Scar makes all have at least a pop of color at the bare minimum. Most of his builds are very colorful unless it's intentionally dark, but if you look at most of the builds Scar makes, they're all pretty full of color. If we take a look at Scar's base from Hermitcraft Season 9, just from here you can see all kinds of colors like red, blue, teal, black, some beige in the jungle wood, and honestly way too many more colors to name them all. The same goes for his base on Hermitcraft Season 8. From here you can see teal, orange, browns, and the same goes for his base on Season 7 of Hermitcraft. All of that to say that Scar uses a lot of different colorful blocks in his builds. If you're not used to building with colors like these, I know it can be a bit scary, but what I would recommend is make a build you're comfortable with, then maybe change the color of something small, like maybe the door, and then next time you build something, change something a little bigger, like maybe the roof. Eventually, if you just take small steps to practice using different colors in your builds, you're gonna figure out what colors and blocks work together, and eventually when you've practiced enough, you're going to be able to build with pretty much any block or color. Another thing that can help is ignoring what the block might be. Like bone block, for example, looks great in a white build, but if you look at it as a bone block, it's not something you might want to use in your build. But if you look at it as a white yellowish kind of color, then when you build something using white blocks, you might think to mix in some bone blocks. It took me a while to get used to building with different colors, so just be patient and keep practicing. Like I said earlier, Scar has a very big imagination, and his builds are almost cartoonish. So if you take that approach of building in a almost used less realistic style, I think that's a good way to build like Scar. Something else that can help find inspiration for your build. If you watch my videos, you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but Pinterest is a very good website to get inspiration for your build. If you search up anything, like medieval house for example, you can just add cartoon art at the end. Then you can find a bunch of pictures of exactly that. And sure, some of these might not be exactly something Scar would build, but it's a great way to find inspiration. And you can see where different colors can be used in a build. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider liking it and maybe even subscribing. I really appreciate all the support recently, so thank you guys very much. Anyway, I think we now have enough information to be able to build like Scar. So I'm going to put all the tricks in this video together to build something cool. And that way you can see that I'm not just throwing random information together to make a video out of it. First things first, I started by laying out the shape. I noticed that Scar's last couple of Hermitcraft bases were on wheels. I don't know why, but it adds to that fantasy style. So I'm building this with the intention of putting wheels on it. Before we keep going, I just want to apologize for the lack of videos recently. I'm still in school and I had my exams a couple days ago, so I was really busy with that. But with those done, we should get back to a regular upload schedule. I just wanted to mention that because it's been a while since my last upload. But as you might be able to tell, I'm getting this shape in for a boat. I also wanted to add a fantasy aspect to it, so I'm adding wheels. I'm honestly not the best at building boats. I kind of have trouble building them, so I was taking a risk by building this. But I think in general, the shape turned out good. With the shape done, it was time to add some color to it. I kind of went into this with no plan. I just knew I wanted some bright colors, just like a lot of Scar's builds. So I took inspiration from his Hermitcraft Season 8 base, and I used a lot of similar blocks that are in those builds. I also tried using a couple of new 1.21 blocks, which I think look great. I forgot to mention the crane, or whatever that thing is sticking up. I wanted this boat to feel like a fishing boat, and I think this gives it that feeling. I then added a bunch of different colors everywhere to texture the whole boat. I also made sure the wheels were connected to the bottom of the boat, and I added some small details to the whole build. Okay, so as I already mentioned, boats are not my specialty. I have a really hard time building boats, so this build was challenging for me. However, I think it's still pretty decent, and the most important part is I think this definitely looks like something Scar would build himself. Now, if Scar was to build something like this, it would probably be a lot bigger and probably a little different. But hopefully this goes to show that you can build something very similar to what Scar builds by following the tricks in this video. As you can tell, this is pretty fantastical, or it's fantasy style, however you want to say it. Another thing Scar does that I completely forgot to add to this build is terraforming, but I forgot to add it to this build, unfortunately. I usually use a lot of mods to build, but unfortunately I don't have access to those mods at the moment because Minecraft updated recently, so I think because of that I just didn't think of creating my own terrain for these builds. Anyway, I also tried to give the build some life by almost telling a story with it. If you look at the crane thing I added to the boat, it gives it some life and some personality. I also added a bunch of details to the boat, and you can tell that stuff is going on by all the different crates and barrels. It's not just empty and dead. Finally, I also used a lot of colorful blocks in the build, and that's it. I hope this goes to show that by following all the tricks in this video, you can build something really similar to Scar. Now, of course, this build still needs some work in my opinion, but it's mostly just a concept. But if you did enjoy this video, I upload a bunch of building related videos all the time, so if you want to learn something new about Minecraft building every once in a while, then consider subscribing. And if you enjoyed the video, consider liking it as well. I hope this video was helpful, and with that, have a great rest of your day.